morning, everyone, and welcome. And my goodness, you are quiet this morning. I mean, I looked up and I thought, wow, this is amazing. Anyway, we welcome you here this morning at 9 o'clock, which is unusual for all of us. And so I would like to call the meeting to order, and if you would please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and we have a quorum this morning. We will open the public hearing at this time, and on introductions, I'm going to have Mr. Carmel introduce item 3A.
Madam President, this is a public hearing under Proposition 218 to consider rate increases, sewer and water rate increases. It's one of two public hearings we'll have. Briefly, on November 12th, notice was given of these rate increases. This hearing was scheduled. Unfortunately, the notice included two mistakes in the zip codes, one for this building and one for the address to which protests were to be mailed. So a decision was made to send a subsequent notice out that advised the public of the correct zip codes and that this hearing would be continued to February 12th to allow an additional 45-day period to protest. So we're recommending that you open the public hearing, take testimony, receive any written protests, and then continue the open public hearing to February 12th. And at that hearing, we'll tabulate the protests and see if the rate increase will go into effect or not. So with that, I think we have a presentation from Alex Handlers, who actually authored the rate increase study. And at this point, we'll take any questions, but I think that's where we are.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so as I said, we are open on this public hearing, and we will begin then with a report and presentation by Alex Handler of Bartles, Wells and Associates. Welcome. Good to see you, Mr. Handlers.
Thank you. Nice to see everybody. Happy holidays. Sorry if you've been through this before. It's probably a good time to have a refresher, though, because you haven't looked at this in a while, and you've got a lot of folks from the community here that I think this would be beneficial to hear. So I'm going to cover, I'll try to move through this reasonably quickly, talk a little bit about the background, talk about your water rates and finances first, then the sewer, then go into a little more detail about the impacts, and we had conducted some surveys with surrounding communities that people are always interested in seeing. Talk a little bit about Prop 218 and the next steps, and with that I will jump into it. Obviously this is a community-governed public agency. I always like to remind everyone, you folks pay the same rates as everyone else. The community's entrusted you to make the decisions, and you guys have done a good job trying to balance your finances. However, you have some financial challenges going forward that are going to require some rate increases. Your water and sewer enterprises are financially self-supporting, at least they're supposed to be. Things have fallen a little bit behind, but the goal is from this rate study to make sure the rates going forward fairly recover the costs of providing water and sewer service. As far as the process, we actually started this back in 2014. Things got deferred a little bit while you were focusing on the emergency water supply advanced water treatment plant. Then got picked up again in 2015, leading up to November 3rd. We had the ad hoc committee meeting, and you got some community input and board input, or ad hoc committee input, which led to some revised recommendations being presented on November 12th. Very soon thereafter, Prop 218 notices were mailed out to the community, all property owners and ratepayers who are not property owners. I apologize for the error in the zip codes. I was the origin of those errors. We were trying to get out to Prop 218s, but I think you're doing the right thing by continuing your public hearing for an additional 45 days, kind of going above and beyond, I think, what a lot of agencies would do to make sure folks have enough time to send in protests or give additional input on February 12th. So the plan is to come back on February 12th, as your legal counsel just noted, to continue the public hearing, and that would be the time at which you would consider adoption of the rate increases. If everything goes as planned, new rates would become effective on March 1st, and in subsequent years, rates would go into effect on January 1st. With that, let me move on to the water rates. And to put the water in perspective, I think it's good to have a little reminder of what's happening with the drought and the community's response to water use. After a few years of drought, your water supplies were kind of under threat of going away, potential for seawater intrusion, and the potential to even run out of water. This district declared a Stage 3 water emergency in January 2014 due to the risk to your groundwater supplies, and at the same time adopted some penalties that were initiated in March 2014. They were pretty significant penalties, and they had a pretty big impact. The community had a tremendous response, and what was already low water use came down substantially more, and I'll show that in a second. And then in 2014, in order to fund the advanced water treatment plant, you adopted the emergency water shortage rates that are currently in effect. So your water use, at least from the latest data we had when we did the study, was down about 43% from pre-drought norms, and that's what this chart here shows. Before the drought, you can see these are the months going across. In the summer months, water use is higher. It tends to decrease in the winter a bit when folks aren't doing any outdoor landscape irrigation. And you kind of had a similar pattern. Some years it spikes a little more, a little bit less. But you kind of have an average use that was pretty consistent for a number of years. But fast forward here to March, April billing period of 2014, when you implemented the emergency penalties and also declared the Stage 3 emergency, the community had a tremendous response, and the water use came way down, and it's kind of flatlined from there. I put a kind of a dotted red line in the middle, but you know, it goes up a little bit in the summer, down a little bit in the winter, but it's been pretty flat, about 43% lower than it used to be. So that's a great response. That's really diminished the impact on your aquifer. It's also had an impact on the finances of your water enterprise, because with the reduced sales, you're getting a lot less revenues. And that's also happening at a time when you haven't done a lot of water rate increases over the last 20 years. Your operating costs have risen, but your rates haven't kept up. On the other side of the coin, I know that due to the pinched finances, anything that's not a high critical capital project has been kind of deferred. You've done some key projects, but other things need to get done and haven't been done, including things like the Fiscalini tank, Rodeo Grounds pump station, Stewart Street tank. These are all critical projects needed for reliability, fire flow, etc., that'll need to happen. And as I mentioned, other than the responses to the drought and the emergency water shortage rates, it's really been minimal increases in over 20 years, and your rates are significantly below the cost of service. And this chart here, I thought, kind of sums it up well. It shows what a typical bill, monthly bill, you guys bill by monthly, I'm showing it in monthly terms here, what a monthly bill is for a customer who's now using 4 units of water by monthly. Historically, that was on the low side. Now, half your bills or so, residential bills, are at this level of use. So historically, people paid, $9.25 a month. You had no rate increases for a number of years. There was a few bump ups in the 2000s, and then again, it's been kind of a period of flatline for a number of years. A lot of folks are paying less than $12 per month for water service, not including the emergency water supply rates. But for your water service, that's pretty darn low. That's about as low as I see, especially considering your circumstances. It's pretty amazing you've been able to keep rates that low for that long. I added a couple of dotted lines here so folks could see what would happen if rates had increased at 3% a year, kind of accounting for inflation. But the reality is water, sewer, and other utilities, the inflation for these type of utilities tends to be higher than typical consumer inflation, and there are some indexes out there that kind of imply 4 to 5% is the norm for utility agencies, water, power, garbage. You could see if you had increased your rate at 5% a year, which is kind of like the utility average, rates would be a lot higher than they are now. What we did was kind of twofold in our rate study. The first thing, we tried to develop some detailed financial projections to figure out what are the annual revenue requirements and where in the big picture do rates need to go. And we base this off all the latest and greatest info, working with staff, getting some good input on a number of calls with the ad hoc committee. And some of the key assumptions I'll just highlight. It's based on the 2015-16 budget. We assumed that the Stage 3 water penalties would end at some point in the near future. Water use is long-term projected at 70% of pre-drought levels. You're currently below that, but we assumed eventually when the drought's over and the penalties are over, water use would have somewhat of a rebound, but wouldn't kick back all the way to where it used to be because you're still under state requirements to get water use down. We did not include any growth. We only included $1 million for debt financing to help fund some of the most critical of capital needs. And the goal there is I know you're pursuing grant funding, and if not that, the state has some low interest rate funding programs that you've gotten before for other projects. We included $250,000 per year for annual capital maintenance of your facilities. You've got a lot of aging facilities that are under, the climate here is not very friendly to things like water tanks, and so $250,000 a year. That's kind of a minimum level that the staff thought was comfortable for keeping the system in reasonable working condition. We included operating cost inflation at 4% for planning purposes, and we did include some reduced costs for professional services. I know there's been a lot of hard look at the finances in recent years to try to get costs down, and we've factored some of that in. So our findings are that you need significant rate increases, particularly on the water side, just to restore financial stability. And once you get your rates in place, you should keep them small annual increases rolling forward each year to keep the rates in line with cost inflation, so you can keep recovering the cost of service and not fall behind. On the next slide, we want to talk about your water rate structure. Everyone currently pays a fixed charge, $23.82 bi-monthly, a little less than $12 a month on the residential side, plus a quantity charge based on metered water consumption. On the fixed side, residential pays a lower charge, commercial pays a higher fixed charge, and that includes historically the first 6 units of water. And I know that's been temporarily reduced to 4 units of water due to the drought response. When I looked at your water, we did analysis of historical water use. This level of water use, now currently 4 units, is it's about, historically it's been over 50% of your water supply. So folks haven't been paying for about 50% of the water supply, or I should say it's included with the fixed charge. Most agencies have a significant fixed charge. Then people have to pay for each unit of water above that, and that's what we're proposing you move to. On the quantity charge side, you'll see you have these 9 tiers, a little bit different for residential, commercials a little bit higher. When we looked at your water use, these tiers, the breakpoints, don't have a lot of correlation to what the typical water use patterns are, because most of your water use is not being billed in addition to the fixed charge, and what little is typically billed in that first tier. Very little water is at these upper tiers. It's a little different on the commercial side, where you have quite a range of commercial customers. You have some small commercial folks, could be a florist, could be an office, small retail. They're getting a lot of their water in the free water, the water allowance that's included with the fixed charge. But then you've got folks like schools and hotels and some other large commercial who very quickly work their way through the tiers and get a lot of their water at the highest rates possible. Now, there's not a huge difference between your low rates and high rates compared to other communities. It's just some of the issues I just already mentioned. I just wanted to highlight a lot of the water's not being billed. Commercial fixed charge doesn't vary by meter size, so even your small commercial customers are paying that same fixed charge as a very large commercial customer, which I don't see that often. You're not the only ones to do it this way, but it's a little more common to make commercial customers pay based on meter size, where the large customer that's putting a lot of demand on the system is paying a higher fixed charge in relation to their demand they're putting on the system compared to a smaller customer. So here are the proposed rates. Most of the changes kick in on it would be March 1, 2016 with this first rate increase. We're recommending keeping a low fixed charge. I know that's something the The board wanted to kind of hopefully minimize the impact on low-use customers. So the fixed charge would stay a little bit higher than where it currently is now, and then escalate at 4% a year. Commercial fixed charges, though, would be based on meter size. This is going to be beneficial for your small commercial customers who currently have to pay a lot higher fixed charge, even though their demand is not that different from a typical home. They're now going to pay a fixed charge right in line with the residential. But as these larger commercial customers who put a lot of demand on the system have larger meters, they're going to pay higher fixed charges. This is the most common way of doing it in California, and I think restores a little equity to the different types of commercial customers that you have. On the quantity charge side, we're recommending transition to a 3-tiered quantity charge rate for your residential customers. Currently, there's 9. With the first tier, would start with the very first unit of water purchase. So folks have to purchase for every unit of water in addition to paying the fixed charge. The first 4 units would be at a discounted rate. The middle units from 5 to 16 units bi-monthly, kind of at the standard rate. And then higher use customers would have to pay a little more based on the additional cost of service for serving those folks. The commercial rate, though, due to the wide divergence of different types of commercial customers you have, from, again, a small office to a large hotel with a restaurant, what most agencies have is a uniform rate. Everyone pays the same rate out of the gate. And I'll point out that is a conservation rate because they have to start paying for each unit of water. A lot of folks thinks it need to be tiers to have conservation incentive, but really it's the dollar per unit that drives conservation, and these rates are not insubstantial. So with the key modifications, it's again going to be a small increase for residential accounts. Higher use residential accounts will see more impact. Small commercial accounts are going to benefit from reduced fixed charges. And I think the biggest impact from the fixed charge modifications will be higher fixed charges on your largest commercial accounts. And on the usage side, sorry, I know I already covered most of this, everyone's going to start paying from the very first unit of water, which is the way most agencies in California have gone, particularly in response to the drought. Doing that's going to have a little higher percentage impact on your low-use customers since they're currently getting all their water at no additional charge. And the residential will be paying 3-tiered rates, and the commercial will now pay uniform rate instead of paying up according to those 9 escalating tiers. So that's the water side. And I'll show you some impacts in a little bit. On the sewer side, similar story. You're operating in deficit mode. Although you've made some improvements over the years, you have a lot of critical projects looming out there on the horizon. You currently have an outstanding state revolving fund loan that has certain debt covenants that were signed onto by the district when you took on that financing. Due to the finances, you're currently out of compliance. Not the end of the world. You've been paying your bills, paying debt service, and your state revolving fund reaches final maturity after the end of this fiscal year. So that's going to reduce your costs and free up capacity to fund operations. The other big wild card on the sewer side is you do have some major capital improvements needed to your wastewater treatment plant. These are probably going to be requirements from the regional board. They're going to be expensive. I'm forgetting the detail. It could be $5 to $10 million range to get your sewer treatment plant back in line. These are things that your engineering staff think don't have to happen right away, but are going to have to happen longer term. So the decision was made not to include these in the rate study at this time. They're not included in the 5-year projections, but these are things that are going to have an impact on your sewer rates a little further down the line. So something for folks to keep their, just be aware of for the future. On the sewer rate side, again, minimal rate increases over 20 years. No rate increases in 18 of the past 22 years. And when we looked historically, your rates had only risen by an average of about 1.4% per year compounded since 1993, which is pretty low. For a home that, historically we could say a typical home used about 6 units of water. I mean, here the median's closer to 4 now with your response to the drought, but someone using 6 units of water over the past 20 years has seen their bill rise about $10 over 20 years. But folks are actually using less water now, so maybe folks have seen about an $8 increase over 20 years, which is pretty phenomenal. That's one of the lowest increases for any agency I work with. So you've done a good job keeping a lid on rates. At the same time, CPI has increased about 70%. So if you adjust your rates for inflation, people are now paying less than they were in 1993. And here again is a similar chart that we showed on the water. Again, you bill by monthly, but I'm showing everything in monthly terms, which I'm used to talking in. Historically, people paid less than $26. You had a few increases in the 2000s for both water and sewer. And then again, it's been flatlined for the last 6-7 years. Again, we show what would rates have been had you escalated by 3% or 5% a year. They'd obviously be a lot higher. Again, we developed financial projections for the sewer side, again, based on your latest budget, assuming water use at 70% of pre-drought levels, no growth. Similar to the water side, we included $250,000 per year for annual maintenance, rehab, repairs, replacements. We did not include the major treatments to the treatment plant, but we did include some operating cost inflation. And again, a nice thing is that the sewer loan is reaching final maturity, which is offsetting the need for rate increases. So on the sewer side, it's small rate increases, surprisingly, are all that are needed. And then in the future, you want to keep the rates in line with cost inflation to prevent them from falling behind. In terms of the rate structure, this is your current rate structure. Like water, everyone pays a fixed charge. It's currently the same for residential and commercial. Everyone pays $65 per bi-monthly billing period, so a little $37.50 per month. It includes the first unit of water. And like water, there's a usage charge. The more people use water, the more they're discharging into the sewer system. And currently that rate's $1.94 for every unit in excess of the first unit. So a few observations here. It's the same fixed in charges for all accounts. Everyone pays the same quantity charges as well. There's no differential for wastewater strength. Now, if it's a high-strength customer putting in high-strength waste, for example, a restaurant, it costs more to treat that at your wastewater treatment plant. So typically, agencies have different charges for commercial accounts depending on their wastewater strength. And that, in fact, is what came out of the whole rate study process. A few things. One is to keep a fixed charge and keep it a substantial fixed charge for revenue stability. However, this proposed fixed charge is lower than your current fixed charge, down from 65 to 56. So folks will pay a lower fixed charge and instead putting a little bit more revenue recovery on the variable quantity charge side, where for the residential customer, the charge now would be $3.24 for every unit of metered water use out of the gate. On the commercial side, we came up with 3 customer classes. Class 1 kind of accounts for your lower strength accounts, offices, retail, stores, schools that tend to put very low wastewater strength into the system. They would pay a charge of $2.84 per unit. Class 2 is kind of moderate commercial, right in line with your residential customers. That would be another large chunk of your commercial customer base. And Class 3 would be moderate to high strength folks, like restaurants, bakeries. If you have a hotel with a restaurant, the charge for those customers would be higher, in line with the higher strength wastewater that they're putting into the system. So again, the general impacts. I think everyone's going to benefit from reduced fixed charges. And again, we're reducing the revenue recovery on the fixed side and increasing your share of revenue recovery on the variable side, but it's still substantial fixed revenue recovery, which is in line with how your costs are. A lot of your costs on the sewer side are fixed costs. Very little actually varies based on the usage. On the usage charge side, getting rid of the first unit that's provided at no cost, residential rate increasing from $1.94 to $3.24 per unit. So folks are going to pay lower fixed charges with a little bit higher usage charges. Folks who use more will pay more. And on the commercial side, the lowest impact, or I guess the biggest benefit of this will be for your small commercial customers. Everyone will pay a lower fixed charge, but your small commercial will pay the lowest, or your low strength customers will pay the lowest wastewater rates. And the folks with higher strength wastewater will pay a little bit more, more in line with the cost of service. So what everyone wants to know is, how's my bill going to change from what it is now to where it is in the future? So we made a few samples for different levels of water use. And the first is for a residential customer using 4 units of water per 2-month billing period. You have about 50% of your residential customers falling into this category, a little bit more. The water bill is going to increase significantly as folks are starting to pay for every unit of water. That'll be a big increase. I'm just kind of highlighting it right here. At the same time, folks will see a decrease in the fixed sewer quantity charge. Here's the water charge here and the sewer charges here, where some folks using low levels might actually see a slight decrease in their wastewater bill. And you add it all together, the total bill would increase by $25.76 per bi-monthly billing period, so a little less than $13 per month. Nobody likes that, but that's pretty amazing in my mind, considering when I kind of went into this, looking at your rate history, I thought you'd need a lot higher rate increases. You haven't had a lot of rate increases over the years. Here's a customer, kind of a typical customer using 6 units. 75% of your residential bills are currently at this level of use or lower. The impacts will be a little higher here. Again, the water bill is going up significantly. The sewer bill is pretty much staying the same. And at the end of the day, the total impact works out to be about $16.62 per month. And we even made one for 8 units. Sorry to bore you with these things, but 85% of your residential bills are at or below this level. Certainly you have a few folks that are using higher levels of water consumption, but this is really capturing most of your customers by the time you get to this 8 units of water per 2-month billing period. And again, the more you use, the more the impact is going to be. For these customers, it would be about a $40 increase per bi-monthly billing period, a little over $20 per month. Nobody likes rate increases, but to put it in context, your rates are pretty low compared to a lot of other agencies out there. So they're going to remain very reasonable to a lot of your surrounding communities. We made a pretty extensive rate survey for the Central Coast area. Currently, you're kind of in the middle, lower middle. With these proposed rate increases, this is for a customer using 4 units per bi-monthly billing period. You're going to stay in the middle range. I'm going to point out that a lot of these other agencies are going through similar challenges that you guys are on the financial side, with their water use coming down, with a need for capital improvements, etc. So I know many of these other agencies are raising rates also. So we're expecting that your rates are going to stay in the middle range for this is kind of a low-use customer. Again, the similar chart for the medium-use customer using 6 units bi-monthly. And here's the chart for the customer that's 8 units bi-monthly. Again, this is 85% of your bills are currently below this level. So your rates are going to stay in the middle range compared to other agencies out there. However, this isn't necessarily the fairest way to compare everybody, because folks here in Cambria use less water than a lot of other agencies out there. Folks have really cut back tremendously. So we tried to make another survey that adjusted for the differential in water use at other agencies. And here is kind of the typical, the 6 units bi-monthly. Currently, you're the lowest once you adjust for actual water use, and you're going to stay on the low level. And here's one for 8 units. Again, this is kind of a higher level, currently a higher level residential customer. Yes, it's going up, but it's still going to be in the middle level compared to other agencies. And we know many of these agencies have already adopted rate increases that are phasing in over the next few years, like Morro Bay, or are looking at rate, or Los Osos, or are looking at rate increases currently, like Paso Robles is going through, I think, a rate process. Atascadero is as well, and I think Nipomo too. So nobody likes rate increases. You need them to fund your cost of service. At the end of the day, your rates are still going to be reasonable compared to other agencies out there. In order to raise rates, you have to go through a process that was enacted pursuant to Proposition 218 by the voters, which is Articles 13C and D of the California Constitution. The section that impacts you is Article 13D, Section 6, which governs property-related charges, which water, sewer, and garbage rates are considered to be a component of. There's 2 things here to be aware of. One are the procedural requirements, and the other is the substantive requirements for the rates themselves. You are following the procedural side. We just wanted to highlight that. You had a mail notice of the proposed increases more than 45 days prior to the holding of a public hearing. You did that. You hold your public hearing, and then eventually when you do adopt the rates, they're subject to majority protest. Now, for the water and sewer rates and garbage rates, they specifically eliminated the voting requirement from those that they have for other types of taxes because it's not a political decision, it's a cost of service decision. However, they did entitle the community to have a majority protest process where people could submit written protests, and if protests are submitted by more than 50% of all the parcels, you can't raise the rates, and you guys have went through that before. The other side that people aren't aware of as much are the substantive side. And I just wanted to walk through those and make clear that you're complying with all of these components. The first is that the revenues cannot exceed the cost of providing service. This isn't a money-making operation. It's a cost of service operation. In fact, your rates currently are below the cost of service. So that's been documented by the financial projections we developed going forward. These rates are designed to recover your cost of service and maintain financial stability. And also, you have audited financial statements that anyone can look at that are independently audited, demonstrating compliance with this. Two is the revenues can only be used for the purpose for which they are collected, and that's also documented in all your financial data. You're not using this, the water sewer rates to help fund fire. They have their own source of revenues. You've got a clear tracking of your funds that you can demonstrate for compliance. The third one is the one that's become a little more controversial in recent years. The amount of the fee shall not exceed the proportional cost of service attributed to each parcel. There have been some court cases that have reinterpreted this over time. And so what we developed these new rates, we made sure to comply with this. We calculated new rates from the grounds up to make sure they reflected the cost of service using reasonable assumptions. And both the water and sewer rates and the quantity charges were designed to recover the cost of service, and we have tables that show that in our calculations. And the fourth thing is you can only charge a fee if if the service is used by or immediately available to the property owner, and you already do that. You're only charging water and sewer rates to folks who are receiving water and sewer service. So at the end, we just wanted to summarize, your rates are designed to comply with all the provisions of Prop 218. Final comments, it's always a balance of competing objective for rates. On one hand, you have a lot of funding needs. You want to keep financial stability going forward, but from working with the ad hoc committee and the board and the community, people also want to keep rates as low as possible. So we're trying to achieve a balance there of raising the rates to where they need to be, but not overdoing it. In fact, you're probably doing the minimal rate increases you can to keep your system in decent shape. As far as next steps, obviously you open the public hearing today. The public hearing will be continued till February 12th, and the new rates would kick in if everything goes as planned on March 1st. And then in the future, it would be small inflationary rate increases pending board review on January 1st of each year. So sorry for being long-winded about that, but that kind of concludes everything we wanted to cover. I'd like to turn it over for any questions or board comments.
Thank you very much again for that overview. Before discussion, I would like to go into public comment. And so that is item 2 on our procedures today. So now we will open this for public comment, and we have one request. And public comment, as I will remind you, is 3 minutes. And so Tina Dickinson.
Good morning, Tina Dickinson, Cambria. I had a question for legal counsel, Mr. Carmel, yesterday on the extended public hearing for protests. That is that if the protest form had the date December 29th, as it has currently, that CFR has put out for folks, would they still be able to use that after today with that date? Mr. Carmel said, any otherwise, this is his response, any otherwise valid protest that's submitted by the close of the public hearing on February 12, 2016 will be considered regardless of the date that's printed on it. So, in other words, the first set of protest forms that we have put out have the December 29th, today's date, for the public hearing. But and if folks are still using those forms, it is my understanding from this email that they will still be considered at the February 12th hearing. Now, as far as Mr. Handler, I had a question. Mr. Handler, in your presentation, I did not see the third EWS charge. I saw fixed charge, quantity charge. I saw no production fee, which we are already being charged on our bills. So that wasn't even presented in that presentation. The CCSD essentially did get a rate increase when it dropped the 6-unit base fee, $23.82 for 6 units, to 4 units. They essentially got a rate increase because we were delivered to 1/3 less water, but paid the same amount. CCSD, first thing that was on there, I think, was CCSD is a community-governed public agency. I'd like to know when the public really had some huge vote presented, where we were presented with a gigantic, the largest project ever undertaken by this district. I'm going to still say EWS because Mr. Handler still has EWS. When are we ever going to get that right? But that was, how can a board on August 22nd, 2013 vote to say we're going to issue intent to serve the next month in September 2013, but 10 days later, we are at a crisis. And that crisis continued, and we cut back and cut back. January 30th is when the general manager finally declared a stage 3. 2 weeks after the governor of California on the 17th of January declared a stage 3. So, in my mind, the people of Cambria did not need this plant at this time. What they needed was the infrastructure improvements, and we are being taken as, we are the cash cow.
Thank you. Your
we
time
are
is
the
up.
cash cow.
You'll need to stop.
Yes, I understand that.
Thank you.
You very much, President Robinette.
Thank you. We have no further request for public comment. Did we have anything for that response from anyone?
With regard to the ballots, that's accurate. We'll accept any ballot regardless of protest ballot, regardless of the date on it, as long as it has the other statutory requirements.
So thank you for clarifying that. So ballots, regardless, are accepted as long as it's one per parcel.
Right.
Thank you. Mr. Handler, did you have any response?
I just wanted to mention, I apologize if I didn't highlight that. I think I had it at the bottom of the slide, but that is correct. There is the temporary O&M charge for the emergency water supply that's only charged when it's in effect. That wasn't on our survey just because it was a temporary thing, and I think when we started this, it wasn't in effect at the time, and so she's correct about that. Just wanted to apologize for that, but we are aware of that, and we did put that on the slide. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. We'll move now to, there are no other public comments, and we will move to continue then the hearing, the public hearing to February 12th, 2016 at 9 a.m. Because this is a continuance meeting, we will need a motion, and after the motion, we can have discussion if we like.
Okay, I'll move.
Director Barringer.
I'll move that we continue but I would like to have a comment after.
Yes, we'll have that after we get the motion.
Second.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded for the continuance, and so board discussion, comments.
Yeah, Madam President, I just wanted to let the public know it's a convenient time. I saw a nice email from our general manager to our water and wastewater people that thanked them for working on Christmas Day. And yes, they also worked on Thanksgiving Day. So these people are, we should think on ourselves at how they're working when we're celebrating and on vacation. So with that, I hope that with the rates increases, we can continue to employ some of the highest quality people that we can. And I think it's important that we have our rates in line for that. The delay, as our financial manager said, the delay of 2 months puts us another $40,000 of uncaptured funds. So hopefully we can get this in effect on March 1st.
Thank you. Further discussion, comments? Director Rice?
Thank you, President Robinette. I just wanted to mention again that I think that the Ad Hoc Conservation Committee needs to get together and come up with some recommendations to the board regarding surcharges and allocations while we are still in a drought and need to protect our aquifers and the associated habitats, and we still have to meet the 75% or 25% reduction that's part of the governor's proclamation. I do think that it's warranted that we look at that now that the the advanced treatment, sustainable emergency water. Can we please get an acronym that's easy to say, because I do not remember what all the words are. I know they're all in there. Thank you. Sustainable water. I'm on the wastewater committee, so. So while I would hope that we could get that going, and I'm glad that we'll have a little bit of extra time to make those recommendations, since the rates are going to be delayed just a little bit. And I very much appreciate staff taking the initiative to extend the time because of those small but significant errors of zip code. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you for that. Any further discussion? Mr. Carmel?
I want to clarify. So the motion was to continue the open public hearing to February 12th.
February 12th.
At 9 o'clock.
At 9 a.m., yes.
And was it seconded?
Yes, I seconded.
With Director Rice.
Thank you.
Moved
Sorry.
and seconded. Okay, so we are ready to vote on this. We have a hand up. We have finished with public comment.
No comment, just a request.
Will I like it, Jerry? It's always nice to hear from everyone in Cambria, including you. And you could make a comment from right where you are.
But that'll be on.
But we're not open for public comment.
It's not a comment, it's a request.
What is your request? I dare say, what is your request?
Jerry McKinnon, Cambria. For the sake of transparency, I request that we be told how many dollars these rate increases will add to each of those enterprise funds, because they do go to the enterprise funds, I believe. And how many dollars will the rate increase give to those two enterprise funds? We know what the rates are. We know that 55% are in the 4-unit area, but the other 45%, well, I'd just like to know the arithmetic. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are ready then for the vote to continue. And I'd like a roll call on this, please.
Director Berenger?
Aye.
Director Rice?
Aye.
Director Sanders?
Aye.
Vice President Thompson?
Aye.
President Robinette?
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. I thank everyone for coming this morning and appreciate it. And this concludes then the hearing on continuance. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.